Chapter 10. Johann Schütz, 1640 to 1690. The Lord forsaketh not his flock, his chosen generations. He is their refuge and their rock, their peace and their salvation. Choking back the tears, Annie turned and bolted down the worn stairs, running as hard as she could through the narrow streets and out the city gate onto the banks of the moat. Drew followed. Mr. Pipes gathered their things, not forgetting his walking stick, and strode rapidly after. Moments later, he came alongside Annie's hunched form squatting on the grassy banks of the moat and put his arm around her. She stared blankly into the quiet water, numb with grief. "I'm most awfully sorry, my dear Annie," said Mr. Pipes tenderly. Annie only sniffled. Drew, meanwhile, walked right past them, studying the wall and gazing into the moat further down. "Hold on a second," he called. "There's a bunch of cannons up there. They all look the same. But Lady Kitty fell from that one just over there. I'm sure of it." Annie felt a surge of hope, but then, how could anything survive a fall from that high wall? "We must go see," said Mr. Pipes, helping her up. "Hey, look!" yelled Drew, tearing off his shirt and sneakers. A big sploosh followed. "He's jumped in the moat," yelled Mr. Pipes. "Come along, Annie." What they saw, moments later, was Drew swimming toward the kitten, its eyes wide with terror and its orange fur plastered with water and only just visible above the surface. He reached Lady Kitty, turned on his back, placing the wet bundle on his chest, and steadying the kitten with one hand, stroked carefully back to the grassy bank with the other. Is she alive?" stammered Annie as he approached. "Sure, sploot," said Drew, spitting out some of the moat he'd swallowed. "Just a bit soggy." "Oh, you naughty kitten," said Annie, taking the kitten from her brother and giving it a long hug. Lady Kitty emitted a sort of gurgling meow, sneezed, hiccuped, and began purring. "And thank you, Drew," she said, giving her dripping wet brother a hug. "It's nothing," said Drew, looking a little embarrassed. "I needed a good dip." A loud ribbit came from close by. "What's that?" asked Annie. Drew dug in the soap pocket of his cargo pants, and with an enormous grin, he pulled out a speckled frog the size of a chicken egg. "Picked this fellow up when I jumped in. They make great pets, Mr. Pipes. Please say I can keep him." "That's all right, then," said Mr. Pipes, shaking his head and laughing heartily, "though I have simply no idea what Swiss immigration will say about all this. But, for now, it's off to the youth hostel for a warm bath and dinner. One more stop before Switzerland." The next day, Mr. Pipes, Annie, Lady Kitty, Drew, and the frog he'd named Rinky Dink traveled by train a few miles southwest to the university town of Tübingen. A short walk from the train station found them in the center of the city. "This is a beautiful place," said Annie. "Bigger than Dinkelsbühl?" said Drew. "Lots bigger." "I like Dinkelsbühl, but Tübingen—" Annie frowned in thought, looking around at the rows of solid trees lining the wide walking path, jackdaws cawing high above in their branches. "Well, Tübingen seems just as old, but it has a freshness about it." "Oh, it is old. The university here was founded in 1477, though the town is older still," said Mr. Pipes. "Lovely place indeed, and recently voted the German city with the highest quality of life." Just then a group of young people rode by on bicycles, and to the left of the path, under the shade of the giant trees, a family chatted and laughed as they spread out a mid-morning picnic. Bells rang brightly from the marketplace just visible through the trees. "That would be the Glockenspiel chiming the hour on the Rathaus," said Mr. Pipes, after a glance at his guidebook. "You can just see its red tile roof and weathered bronze spires through the trees. It dates from before Luther's 95 Theses, 1511. "Rathaus?" asked Drew. "Some of the names Germans give things." Mr. Pipes laughed. "Language consensus is rather important. We've agreed that rat means, well, simply rat, but Germans have agreed that it means council. So Rathaus means council house or town hall. Ah, yes, just ahead is the Neckar River. Popular place, no doubt, on such a lovely summer morning." "Swans!" said Annie, spying several large white birds drifting in the calm water. "And look at the reflection of those old houses and that church spire in the blue water. I could sit here and draw all day." "Boats!" added Drew, watching a near collision in the middle of the river. "They're all different colors. Could we rent one?" "I fear others have had much the same idea," said Mr. Pipes. "There's only one left pulled up across the river where it appears they're available for hire." "Bridge, just ahead," said Drew. "I'll race over and snag the last one." "Splendid idea, Drew. We'll catch you up." Moments later, Drew, panting for breath, watched in frustration as a young man paid for the last boat and, picking up the oars, prepared to push off. "Rats!" said Drew out loud as he collapsed onto the grass to catch his breath. "Hello there," called the young man in near perfect English, pausing as he readied the boat. "Lovely day for some rowing. Did you want to go rowing? Well, yes, said Drew. Just then Mr. Pipes and Annie joined him. Carry on, friend, said Mr. Pipes, waving at the young man. We'll simply wait until another boat becomes available. Enjoy your row. Won't you join me? It will be a very long time before another boat is free on such a day as this. Do come, you must. I need to practice my English, he concluded with a laugh. If you insist, and with our gratitude, said Mr. Pipes. He introduced himself and the children. I am Dietrich, said the tall, blond young man. Who would like to row first? You simply must, my friend, said Mr. Pipes. Well now, said Mr. Pipes, as Dietrich, with expert strokes, maneuvered the yellow rowing boat into midstream. We must know more about our benefactor. I say, you are a university student here in Tübingen. For the next little while they learned about Dietrich, his family, his aspirations, and his studies. So I decided to study law. Tübingen seemed to be the best place for law, he concluded with a shrug. After a pause he said, Shame on me, I have done all the talking. What are you doing in Germany, and here in Tübingen? Besides, that is, collecting wildlife. Is that a frog? They laughed, and Mr. Pipes began explaining how he met the children last summer and about where they had been in Germany so far. Wittenberg, Erfurt, Worms, said Dietrich, reviewing some of their destinations. Sounds like you have been following Martin Luther around the country. Indeed we have, replies Mr. Pipes. Mr. Pipes tells us all kinds of wonderful stories, said Annie, about German hymn writers. That includes Martin Luther, you know. Hymns, said Dietrich, raising his eyebrows and resting on his oars for a moment. Like what some people sing in church? Most people visit Germany for the beer, more of it produced and consumed in Germany than in any other European country, probably than any place in the world. This is a new one on me. You've come for the hymns? He concluded with a laugh. His English sounded more correct as he spoke. Indeed, said Mr. Pipes. So teach me about German hymn writers from Tübingen, said Dietrich, a hint of mockery in his voice. Better still, replied Mr. Pipes, ignoring Dietrich's taunt. I'll tell you about a brilliant and distinguished law student. Annie and Drew, do you remember my mentioning Johann Schütz when we explored Neander's cave? I think so, they replied. Drew couldn't help noticing how tall and self-assured Dietrich seemed, and he sure rowed well. He caught a glimpse of Dietrich's strong jaw as he turned to look forward down the river. His patronizing smirk made Drew uneasy. He hoped Mr. Pipes wouldn't say something that would embarrass all of them. This sophisticated European student acted like he knew something Mr. Pipes didn't understand. Drew didn't like admitting it, but he was worried. Maybe they should just talk about the weather. He nudged Rinky-Dink with his finger, and the frog hopped into the air and landed with a splash in a puddle of water, sluicing back and forth with the motion of the boat. Born in 1640, Mr. Pipes seemed unabashed as he began the story. Johann Schütz eventually studied at your university, Dietrich, and achieved high honors in both civil and canon law. He quickly gained a reputation in Germany as a man with considerable legal understanding. Mr. Pipes paused, looking over his glasses at Dietrich, but he is long forgotten for anything achieved in that profession. So why teach me of this man? Asked Dietrich. Ah, a most interesting question. May I ask you, for what will you be remembered hundreds of years after your legal career is ended by your own death? Johann Schütz's most enduring work, his hymns, are sung in many languages in the Christian church the world over. I say, not a Sabbath passes where his greatest hymn, All Praise to God, who reigns above, is not sung by faithful Christians, sung over and over again hundreds of years after his death, truly extraordinary when one pauses to think on it. I suppose I must hear this hymn, replied Dietrich. Drew groaned inwardly. Surely Mr. Pipes wouldn't sing it in front of Dietrich and right here on the river crowded with boats filled with people, and expect Drew to join in. He felt panic rising, maybe some diversion. He looked in the quiet water. Falling overboard? But Mr. Pipes seemed to read Drew's thoughts, and pulling out his hymnal suggested, Perhaps I'll simply read it to you under the circumstances. With flushed cheeks, Drew listened as Mr. Pipes read. All praise to God who reigns above, the God of all creation, the God of wonders, power and love, the God of our salvation. With healing balm my soul he fills, the God who every sorrow stills. To God all praise and glory. Mr. Pipes continued reading about God's almighty power, making and keeping all his works in perfect justice. Then with feeling he read on. I cried to him in time of need, Lord God, oh, hear my calling. For death he gave me life indeed, and kept my feet from falling. For this my thanks shall endless be. Oh, thank him, thank our God with me. To God all praise and glory. Humbled by Johann Schütz's grateful testimony expressed in the hymn, Drew, feeling ashamed, shifted positions on the forward thwart. Dietrich's rowing slowed as Mr. Pipes continued reading, his voice rising and falling and pausing at just the right moments. The Lord forsaketh not his flock, his chosen generation. He is their refuge and their rock, their peace and their salvation. Ye who confess Christ's holy name, to God give praise and glory. His voice rising in a doxology of praise, Mr. Pipes finished reading and quietly closed the hymnal. There it was again, thought Annie, his chosen generation. She frowned and began drawing in her sketchbook. After yesterday's near tragedy, she felt relieved that Lady Kitty seemed only interested in sleeping on the floorboards of the rowboat. Dietrich finally broke the silence that followed. I'm not at all certain what the man was talking about in those lines, but I am certain one has to make some rather enormous assumptions, unfounded assumptions about God. And I suppose the Schütz fellow would say he learned those assumptions from the Bible, would he not? Undoubtedly he would say precisely that, said Mr. Pipes, though he would not call them assumptions. Drew thought he detected a sparkle of anticipation in Mr. Pipes's eyes. But, my dear sir, said Dietrich after a pause, you seem a reasonably intelligent man. How can you possibly believe such, forgive me for saying so, such utter nonsense? The best authorities have proven the Bible to be a veritable minefield of errors and inconsistencies. Surely you are aware of this, sir. Drew felt that same uneasiness creeping up his scalp. He had heard his parents say similar things, and it always made him feel so ignorant. One does hear such criticisms, from time to time, leveled against the Bible, said Mr. Pipes calmly. But unless you have a particular error to discuss, may I ask you a question? Ask, replied Dietrich, grinning over his shoulder, stroking with his starboard oar to avoid a bright red rowboat crossing their bow. Who do you think Jesus is? Jesus? Yes, the biblical authors, writing over some 1,600 years, devote considerable space to answering that question. One might argue the entire book is devoted to answering this question. To put it in Johann Schütz's words, what does it mean to confess Christ's holy name? Dietrich frowned and thought before replying. He was a man, he replied guardedly. But you do believe he truly lived, that he was a historical figure in flesh and blood? Yes, replied Dietrich, but just a man, like you or like me, or perhaps a bit greater. Why greater? Well, it is well accepted that he was a great moral teacher. He taught men to love others, to do good. Ethics, you know. What do you mean by good? Well, you know the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. That is all Jesus really taught, now isn't it? Dietrich concluded a little defensively. It seems to me rather odd, said Mr. Pipes, crossing his legs and gripping his knee with his hands, that they would crucify a man for teaching people to be nice to one another. Doesn't that seem a little strange to you, Dietrich? Dietrich suddenly became very concerned about the precise positioning of his oars, but made no reply. Mr. Pipes took his Bible out and, licking his finger, turned to a text. You no doubt have read the Bible. Yes, well, I've read about it, Dietrich stammered. Drew listened as Mr. Pipes read text after text declaring that Jesus is in fact God. I and my Father are one. Therefore the Jews sought the more to kill him, because he said also that God was his Father, making himself equal with God. Now, Dietrich, I am an old man, but even I understand something of basic logic. When forming your understanding of someone who went about claiming to be God, you have but three options. Either he was a man hopelessly self-deceived, someone with a deranged mind, a madman. If, for example, I insisted I was God and the only way to eternal life, you would rightly conclude that I was a man, shall we say, rowing with but one oar in the water. Your second option would be that I was intentionally trying to dupe men into believing I was someone that I simply was not. You'd be hard-pressed to call anyone good who was either so self-deceived or so intent on deceiving others. Dietrich's left oar splashed awkwardly. Drew raised his eyes in wonder. This guy had looked like a champion oarsman until now. The bells from the glockenspiel at the Rathaus rang the hour. Mr. Pipes glanced at his watch and said, You must be near starved, Dietrich. Let us buy you some refreshment. After all, you have been so kind allowing us to intrude on your solitude, and you certainly have worked up an appetite with all that rowing. We must continue our discussion over lunch. Do you know of anywhere that serves tea, good English tea? Dietrich returned the rowboat and led them to an outdoor cafe nearby. Better here, in the open air, he explained, smiling at Annie's kitten and the bulge in Drew's pocket that was Rinky-Dink the frog. Their waitress, the full skirt of her traditional peasant dress swishing ahead, escorted them to a table set against a lattice fence bordering the courtyard of the cafe. They sat down under the shade of a broad maple tree. While Drew studied the menu, Annie looked across to a grassy lawn bathed in sunlight where university students lounged, some reading, some eating, and others kicking a soccer ball. Dietrich seemed to have regained some of his confidence and smiled indulgently as Mr. Pipes led in prayer. Then, between bites of beef stroganoff, he said with a slight taunt, So, either he is a madman or a con artist, he paused. And I suppose you have one more option for me. You are an intelligent young man, Dietrich, replied Mr. Pipes, giving the law student a penetrating look over his glasses. Logic is Christianity's great ally, my dear man. Why don't you tell me what is the only remaining option? Dietrich swallowed and fiddled with his fork before answering. But how could it be true? He blurted. For the first time it sounded like a genuine question, and the look in his eyes suggested that he wanted a real answer. How could Jesus really be the Son of God? It cannot be. Everything I have been taught besides all religions just point the many different ways to God. Is it not far better to be tolerant of other religious opinions? After all, isn't religious intolerance responsible for all the devastating wars down through history? No, I prefer to tolerate all religions and live at peace. Ah, live at peace now. I must remind you of the atheistic 20th century filled with more bloodshed than the rest of human history can count. But what about when you must answer to a holy God for your defiance of his truth? How will your tolerance serve you then? Your third option about Jesus is absolutely true, said Mr. Pipes, wiping his mouth with his napkin. Which of necessity makes all other views? He fixed his kind eyes on Dietrich and said with a decisive nod of his head, false. Pushing aside his plate, he opened his Bible, and this book, true from beginning to end, declares that truth to anyone who seeks with all his heart. A look near panic came over Dietrich's face. We are all desperate sinners, Dietrich, but there is hope. Jesus himself said, continued Mr. Pipes, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh unto the Father but by me. Mr. Pipes paused, studying the young man's face. As if to sweep it all away, Dietrich shook his head vigorously. No, no, I cannot believe that all other religions are wrong, that Jesus is the only way. It is a monstrous idea. It is, he blustered, looking for the right word. Intolerable? Suggested Mr. Pipes, a little twinkle in his eye. Yes, that it is. Dietrich abruptly stopped. Drew thought he looked like a fox cornered by the hounds. You see, Dietrich, said Mr. Pipes, your ideas about toleration are proven false by your own intolerance. What you dislike in Christianity you practice in your own intolerance of Christianity. You don't really believe all ways lead to God. You are prepared to exclude Jesus' teachings as an invalid way. That, my dear friend, is not tolerance. Dietrich did not answer. He drew circles on his plate with his knife. You see, went on Mr. Pipes, you can call Jesus a madman, a deceiver, or you can fall at his feet and call him Savior and Lord, but you cannot call him a good man. You are a student of law. Think legal evidence, my man. You have given me a great deal to think about, sir, said Dietrich soberly. You must read this book, said Mr. Pipes. It is the truth, and the truth alone will set you free. But how do I know that? Dietrich ran his fingers through his blond hair. I've always heard it is so filled with errors. Mr. Pipes smiled and plopped his guidebook to Germany on the table with a thud. He opened to Tübingen and found the information on their cafe. The prices are slightly higher on the menu than this book said they would be. There are, no doubt, other errors. It is therefore worthless to our travels. Dietrich smiled. Yes, of course, I see something of your point. Every book you open, Dietrich, said Mr. Pipes, contains errors, but you continue to consult books. Why? Because they claim to have the information you are looking for. Now open God's book, the sinner's guidebook to eternal life. Read his words of truth and life. Prove to yourself that the Bible, like no other book, is true from beginning to end. Then cry to Jesus in time of need, went on Mr. Pipes, and he will give you life indeed. Confess Christ's holy name, my friend. Confess his name and give God all praise and glory. Mr. Pipes and Dietrich exchanged addresses, and after warm handshakes all around, including Lady Kitty, he left them. Wow, said Drew, looking at Mr. Pipes with something akin to awe. Wow. Annie glanced around and scattered tables, then said, I just wish you could have, well, you know, saved him. I say, Annie, replied the old man, raising his eyebrows in surprise. The God who reigns above, he alone saves sinners, my dear. God, by his Spirit, must reveal his Son to Dietrich, and without God's sovereign work in his lost soul, no amount of reasoning will open his blind eyes. We must earnestly pray that God will grant Dietrich the gift of saving faith. Drew opened a little box he'd found and checked on Rinky-Dink. He seemed so sure of himself, I wondered if you could do it. Do what, my boy? Beat him, said Drew, replacing the lid and slamming his fist into his palm. Beat him? I had no intentions of beating him. No, my boy. I wanted to demolish his arguments, certainly, but I had no intention of demolishing him. Persuade him? Yes. You see, I want Dietrich to know the forgiveness of sin, the freedom of the new birth, and the joy of worshiping and serving God all his days. That, my boy, is not beating him. Nothing like. I wish I knew what to say when... Drew frowned. Well, you know, when people say they don't believe in Jesus or the Bible. You do, my boy, replied Mr. Pipes. Tell them what Jesus did for you. And of course, the more you know the Bible, the more you will be able to give an answer to anyone who asks for reasons why you believe. Annie stroked Lady Kitty and, biting her lower lip, looked across the courtyard nervously. What is troubling you, my dear? Asked Mr. Pipes, following her gaze. Oh, she began, now biting her knuckle. Well, maybe it's nothing. What is nothing, my dear? Asked Mr. Pipes. Annie didn't want to point, so she gestured with her head across the courtyard. But I'm almost sure it's him, and he's been here the whole time. It is he, you mean? Said Mr. Pipes, following her gaze through the other guests eating lunch. Then he caught sight of a young man wearing a university student uniform of sweatshirt and jeans. He paused before continuing. Remove the black leather jacket and boots. And earrings, added Drew. And we have found our spy again, he concluded, smiling and rubbing his hands together. All right, this'll be great. What's our plan? Mr. Pipes' eyes narrowed. How could this man repeatedly find them? He must be very good. But why was he after them? And for whom did he work? Mr. Pipes' uneasiness grew. He looked at Annie and Drew. The children might be in danger, real danger. Gather your things, he said in even tones. I seriously doubt that we can throw him off our scent between here and the youth hostel, but we shall try. A plan began forming in Mr. Pipes' mind as they visited the Hohentubigen castle that afternoon. Yes, it was a rather bold, perhaps desperate plan, but it just might work.